Who are the 5 biggest losers of Street Fighter V's definitive update? We take a look at the patch notes and try to determine just how bad these nerfs will hurt these characters, and address whether or not Capcom hit their biggest problem character, all on this week's episode of Talk & Block. We're talking today about the biggest losers of this patch, of this balance update, listing the 5 top losers. Now, okay, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, before we even get that far ahead of ourselves, I'm going to say please like, comment, subscribe, Psycho Crush the like button. That's what we say around here. And guys, if you could please subscribe. There's a lot of you that watch and not all of you sub. If we could change that a little bit, that would be very awesome. But
John, I am a subscriber. I just wanted you to know. So.
Oh, did you just do it because of that?
No, I've been a subscriber actually from the get-go.
It'd be funnier if you just did it because of that.
Well, you know what? Strike that from the record. I just did it. I just subscribed. Thank you for
unsubscribe and resubscribe. Okay, so we've got our 5 biggest losers of this balance update. Before we jump into it, I want to clarify. There's a couple of ways you could assess this. You could say whoever got the most. In terms of quantity, the most nerfs, you could say that's a big loser. You could also assess this by, well, how much do these nerfs change what these characters want to do in their gameplay? Or you could also go by, well, how far down the tier list, especially relative to how everybody else has changed, are these characters going to plummet? And I think I'm to define it, I'm gravitating closer to the latter there, maybe with a sprinkling of the middle one there, but I don't think it's just quantity of nerfs, and we'll talk about certain characters, or maybe at least one that could be argued to be on this list that I didn't put on this list. But I'll jump right into it here, talk about our first biggest loser of the definitive Street Fighter V patch, and that is Urien. What do you think about Urien in this already? Do you agree? I just want to ask that.
Yeah, Urien would actually be very far up there on my list. That I think I sent a premature list over to you that I didn't have him where the proper spot would be, but he's very high up there. The EX headbutt nerf is just unbelievably destructive to him. So
it might be the single biggest nerf in this patch, like not necessarily that Urien's the most changed or the most nerfed, but it might be the single biggest nerf of any like single line item on that update. It might be this one, because Urien just lost a huge part of his defense, and he no longer has an invincible reversal. That's a really big deal in this game. When you generally want to identify how good certain characters are just off the bat, what are the things you look for? You look for, do they have a 3-frame normal, which I believe Urien does not have.
He does not have. And
then do they have an invincible reversal, or a DP? Urien had that. Now, it wasn't the best invincible reversal, but it had little things that, like maybe a traditional Shoryuken uppercut doesn't really function in the same way. It was what I like to call a double-edged sword of a DP, because you could bait it with because the startup was so slow. But even so, that was always a threat that even when you finally got Urien on his back foot and you had him on defense, which was rare and hard to deal with, or hard to get to, he could at any point whip this out, and it was one more shot at getting away from you. And with as much of a powerhouse as Urien is on offense in like all aspects, plus he's got the Aegis Reflector, which can also be something of a defensive tool, the character just has been top tier. And they're not hitting his Aegis very much. They do a little bit here, and we'll talk about that in a second. But the main thing here is they are chopping out one of his legs from under him in a way, with getting rid of I think the single biggest defensive tool he has outside of the ability to block.
Yeah, and it's about damn time. Urien is not a defensive character. He never has been. He's always been known about the offense, and that's what he should be based on. And the fact that Capcom even gave him this tool from the get-go was an interesting one. And again, as you say, a lot of characters are defined in this game on if they have an EX reversal or not. And I think that's why they give it to him, but it never fit the character. And again, you can also make that argument with Guile, like, why does Guile have so much rush down and in-your-face stuff and when he's mostly a zoner, right? And it just, I am glad overall to see this change for Urien. One, he's been one of the best characters in the entire game for the entire lifespan. Urien players do not need any extra help. They're plenty good as is. Now they just
they're getting some.
Now they have to be on the same playing field as a lot of other people, and that's good to see. It's like, yeah, hey, you scrubbed a lot of people out for a lot of years. Now you can be on the same territory as everyone else. Here we go.
Yeah, and it's tough to say how far this is going to send Urian down the tier list, because at the same time he got some buffs in that his fireballs and his headbutts and special moves can do more combo-age, which is a term. He's better for combos. He can dole out a little more damage in the right situations. And so you were still going to be able to play Urian like an offensive mad person, but you're not going to have that safety net. And it's maybe a little much to even call it a safety net, because you could get crush countered out of it. But you're not going to have an EX or an invincible reversal anymore. He also loses a little bit in his neutral, because his standing medium punch has a more punishable hurt box lower. So you can hit that with things like low forwards more effectively now. And all of his fireballs were nerfed in that the hurt box that lingers around his hands is more pronounced now. So if you jump over a fireball, there's a better chance that you're going to be able to clip him before he gets back into a blockable status. But and back Aegis, when he holds back and puts out the Aegis, that's also a little bit slower. So all in all, it's like Urian got hit a little bit in the neutral, a lot of bit in the defense, but he's still able to go crazy on people once he gets his stuff started, which feels like what that character kind of is.
It should be, yeah.
So
I love it in the patch notes how they say that Urian players need to be more skillful now to land damage. And
they said it a few times.
There are so many shots fired by Capcom. Shouts to Capcom listening to Talk and Block here, taking a lot of the stuff that we suggested and putting it right into the game. We really do actually appreciate that. And it's, again, when you have these lower execution characters, now Urian does have technical stuff, and Capcom flat out admits that, but you didn't have to use it. That was the biggest thing that you and I talked about a lot. And here's Capcom flat out saying, hey, you need to be more skillful with this character now to get this damage out and get this stuff. You can still do with this stuff. You can get even more damage if you actually have some skill. But if you don't, now you're eating all that offensive pressure that everyone else is, that Urian players have made us eat for these last 5 years he's been out. There we go. Eat your own dog food, Urian players. There it is.
Yeah, he's got the Luke mechanic where he can charge up his fireball to a certain extent, and if he gets it the right timing, he can both combo and get more damage, which is interesting. By the way, this is not in any particular order. These are just the 5 most, and also this is very early on. It's speculative to a degree. Now we've really looked at these patch notes, and we've really investigated this game, but we'll see how things actually pan out. Yeah. Before we go any further, I want to ask, though, if you guys could let us know in the comments, I should have done this before Urian, but better late than never, who you think the top 5 most nerfed characters are, and then also jump back in there after we're done and tell us if you agree or not with this list that I've come up with. But number 2 on this non-ordered list is Cammy. These are 2 of my safer ones before we get into potentially more debated characters. But Cammy, she's been really good from the beginning, yada yada. We all know the story of Cammy. But the first thing that we see Capcom did to her was they reduced her stun and her health. They made her more of they added to the glass part of her glass cannonness, if you will. And so now she has stun and health on par with the likes of Seth and Akuma, tied for the lowest in the game. And that can sometimes feel like, okay, so 25 health, what is that, less than a jab or a light attack? Sure, but think about it this way. Every single time in this season, or seasons past, where Cammy won a round with 25 health left or more, she loses that round now. And anytime she got within 25 stun but didn't get stunned, well, she gets stunned now. And I don't know what the numbers are, but you gotta know that if you get stunned, it's likely that you're losing that round. Yep. A correlation of getting stunned is usually the loss of the round. So that right off the bat is very nice to see. Now that doesn't affect how she plays at all, unless the person playing her is like, oh, I have less health, I'm going to be a little bit more timid in my play. But
no. That's I have less health, I'm going to be more crazy. That's what I'm seeing from the Cammy players right now. It's like, why would I not go crazy? I'm playing Cammy. And then I also want to mention, just with the health and stun nerfs, it's also damage scaling is a huge thing in this game, and when you get below 50% health and other stuff, the damage scaling continues to go up, so damage reduction happens. And so 25 health and stun in Street Fighter 5 is a lot like 50 health and stun in Street Fighter 4. It is a significant amount of health reduction for Cammy.
Well, there you go. So it's a good start. Now, does this lop her off out of the top 2, top 3? I don't know, but she's got some more nerfs. Let's go through them. Standing heavy punch, which we call here in Arizona the purse, because it looks like she hits you with her purse. It's a very close, and that purse has like bricks in it, of course. But it's a very close move. It's fast, and I think of it as a a whiff punish tool for Cammy, where she kind of catches you in this pocket where you've extended, and she smacks you, and it goes into the follow-up of her choice. This move has more risk associated here in the neutral. It's got the bigger hurt box and the lingering recovery frame. So now if she misses this move, you're going to be more able to hit her or punish her for doing so. And the same thing goes for, I think, an even more important move. This might be arguably her biggest nerf, is this crouching medium kick. Got the same treatment. So now her go-to low poke, which she doesn't have to always rely on, but it's one of her absolute best ones. She's got a lot of really good ones. Is now more risky to use in the neutral. So Cammy's gotten hit 2 pretty important buttons to her in the neutral, but I see that, and you also have the reduced stun and health. But Cammy doesn't have to play neutral is the thing. So I wonder how much are these going to resonate with her? And I want to ask you, John.
She's top 1, prior to this, and I still think she's like top 5, maybe worst case top 10. She's still incredible. It's still like she's everyone else is playing chess and Cammy's playing checkers. And just to talk a little bit about that standing heavy punch thing, one of the things you didn't mention, it has a 6 frame startup, which is faster than a number of characters' medium attacks.
That's like a medium attack.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're lucky, you got a 6 frame medium attack, right? And Cammy's got that on her heavy button. So, I mean, that just goes to show how much privilege Cammy players have. And even then, right in the patch notes, they also call out Cammy players for complete lack of skill, which is pretty much universal among every Cammy player ever. None of them are skilled. They actually say you have to differentiate between the heavy spiral arrow and her medium ones now to actually do combos. And they're like, we actually added some level of thought required to play Cammy. So you
got to pick one or the other depending on the situation. Identify the situation and choose the best option.
Yep. Use your brain, that's Cammy the other players for the first time ever. That should be the note in there. But
I don't wanna. So and the change you're talking about is both a nerf and a buff, but it's aimed at not necessarily changing. It's aimed at making people pay more active attention and use the correct version of spiral arrow in their combos. So you can actually get more damage now if you're close up, but if you're farther away, then the heavy spiral arrow won't hit both hits and you'll get less damage. So you got to use the medium in those situations. So a little bit to think about. When I was in Las Vegas for Red Bull Kumite and I was talking to Brian F., who was one of the participants there, did very well, got in the top 8. He was talking about Cammy's crouching medium kick, and I believe this is a couple months ago, but the gist of what I recall here is that people were talking about it, especially in the pro levels, as something that was very much conclusively hit confirmable at the pro level. This is offline. And so when that's the case, when you have something that good, that powerful, and you can use it that consistently, you can go into her, spiral arrows or whatever, it's too much, and people have been practicing online only to go offline. Maybe that sharpened their hit confirm skills. But you see people like NL just go ham with Cammy and play her amazingly well, but she's also got such a high ceiling for ability, and it's relatively easy to do a lot of those things. Now, no one's doing them as consistently as players like NL, but still, just one of the easiest characters. She has gotten hit here in her neutral with her, what I would say, her best poke, her best counter, her best whiff punish. She's lost vitals, but she can still just zip about the screen, right? And then she has a bunch of changes to encourage people to use her other V skill and V trigger. So those are buffs, but I don't know if people will navigate over there or not.
Yeah. Why use your head when you play Cammy? Just pick what everyone else does and do exactly what they do, and you're going to be pretty good to go. So hold forward, kill the opponent. I'm pretty sure the CEO of Capcom plays Cammy because that's the only reason I can think that she continues to survive in this game. And like Capcom is just, again, I talked about it in one of our previous episodes, like Capcom attempts to nerf Cammy and then like misses and previously would hit Alex, but Alex actually got pretty good.
Yep.
Cammy players.
So I do think that like looking at these patch notes, there's a substantial amount of nerfing here. I don't know if it will actually manifest all that, but it certainly will to a degree, and I think it's enough to put her in the top 5. That said, I'm still wary of Cammy because how can you not be? Okay, so character number 3 on our list here is Rashid of the Turbulent Wind.
Oh yeah.
Rashid has been hit a handful of times over the years, to be sure, but it still hasn't been enough, and he was regarded as still one of the best in a fairly frustrating way over the last year or so. So what happened to Rashid? Well, if Urian got arguably the single biggest change, and that was or the single most impactful change, I could also say, and that was to basically take away his invincible reversal, Rashid also got knocked down a peg in this particular department. His invincible reversal was made to be more like Urian's used to be, in that the startup is so slow that opponents can now pressure Rashid on his wake up and still have time to block if he goes for that wake up DP. This hits him in the defense hard, and that is somewhere that we have really wanted to be hitting Rashid, not so much because of his frame data on defense, but more because of all of his maneuverability and tools to escape bad situations. And then he's just been amazing on offense for a lot of reasons. So the fact that we can keep him on defense more consistently now is a really big deal. How do you feel about this pretty major Rashid change?
This is probably my favorite change in terms of a nerf in the entire game. One of the things I will say, we've talked about this quite a bit, Rashid is still not super common outside of offline tournaments, but in online tournaments, or offline tournaments, I should say, we just see him all the time, super dominant. And actually right here on the patch notes, they say that his unconstrained movements allow him to taunt and dance circles around his opponents.
Yep.
And literally they say, well, he's supposed to have lower defense, and that was, kind of the argument and stuff like, but they even say in here, his defense is actually super high still. And he's one of those characters where Capcom has attempted to nerf him and somehow buffed him in the process, and just gotten away with everything. Just the most privileged character in a lot of respects. And so I'm super happy about this, because now he actually does have to think when he's on defense and other stuff. Like, I mean, it wasn't that long ago where he would get an EXDP and then he would get Okazemi and pressure afterwards. It was like, I did a reversal, now you die. Now you are completely dead. And it's like, oh my, why? And so finally they figured it out. I don't know why they got Rashid so well, and yet they somehow messed up on Cammy. But hey, I will take it. Any day of the week, I will take this.
Yeah, I think that this change by itself would put him on this list for me, but he also got some of his V-Trigger 2 BS reduced. It's the Fireball, or the I think it's called the Haboob, on that is now more negative on block. It's down to -6 instead of -2, so 4 frames. That's pretty considerable. His critical art lost 7 frames of invincibility, so now it's got invincibility for 10 frames instead of 17. We'll see how that manifests, but hey, 7 frames of invincibility, that's no laughing matter. His light fireball doesn't push as far back on block, so when he's minus afterwards, I think he's -4, you can take better advantage of that, so that's nice. I think all in all, Rashid's risks are a little bit more legitimate now. And like I said, that has been a big problem for the rest of the community. People have wanted to see him actually have to hold some stuff, and now maybe he will, at least a little bit more. We'll see how it actually resonates when it gets out there in the wild.
Yeah, he's still going to be really, really darn good. Because, I mean, it's hard to take a character who's been dominant in these games and reduce them down after all this time. But what it does is it removes a lot of his super cheap stuff. And what you're going to see is some of the people who are basically just playing Rashid to be super cheap and dirty, they're going to actually go to other characters now, because it's like, okay, well, I now actually have to think to play Rashid sometimes, and I don't have every advantage pretty much, and so I'm probably going to go look at someone like a Cody or someone like that, and that's actually a really good thing for the game. Hey, if you're a fan of Rashid and you want to make him work and other stuff, more power to you. He's still got plenty of tools to do that, but now you just don't have every freaking privilege on the planet. So channel 2,
yeah.
I don't know where I'm going with that one, but yes, so happy to see this.
Absolutely. Okay, so number 4 is the character I'm actually least confident in, although I think she's all right for this list, and that is Colleen. Colleen got hit in the V-Trigger 2. I think the most notable change here is that her standing heavy punch in V-Trigger 2 got nerfed, and that's on hit, that's on block, and that's on even crush counter.
Yep.
This is one of the strongest single normals in the game, and it's been incredibly useful for Colleen for a good while. You pair this in with her V-Trigger 2 abilities to navigate the screen quickly and suddenly, and like neutral becomes this hellacious thing to try to deal with Colleen for a lot of characters, especially if you don't have something like a fireball, although in V-Trigger 2 she kind of wants you to throw them fireballs. So now this move has less advantage, which means she can still combo after a crush counter, but she's not going to get as much. She's not going to get as much advantage regardless of how she hits it, so that's nice. And then she was also hit in the EX Parabellum, which is, like her 100 hands that launches you, the EX version. That comes out just about every round, sometimes more than once. That's one of her most go-to tools in her arsenal. And now that does a little bit less damage and stun, so there's that. And they also hit her crouching anti-air, or her crouching heavy punch as an anti-air, which is interesting. I think that they felt like Colleen was able to control the space too much, and they really wanted people to be like, if you jump at her, that should be a weakness, in the same way that kind of that's a weakness for, say, Karen, and which is going to get confusing if you're Japanese and saying Colleen and Karen, but the rich girl, and like, she can still anti you, sure, but she's got to see that coming from like a mile away, and she has to be especially ready where, other characters with an invincible DP, unlike Urian, might be able to do so a little bit more easily or a little bit more quickly. So it looks like they wanted to make Colleen a little less daunting on the ground, and they want to make it so that you can jump at her and have a little bit more success. Yeah. How far do you think this is going to send her, though?
Not far, but also I don't think she was like super dominant like, Rashida or Cammy was. Like, I think she was, pretty decently up the tier list, but most people didn't have her in like the top 5. They had her more of like the top 10 range, and some people even had her like top 15. Like, there's not a lot of Colleen dominance we've seen over the years here, but there's enough where I'm happy with these nerfs. They feel about in line with the character, where it's like, let's have characters have defined strengths and defined weaknesses. In Colleen, when you start getting into characters like Colleen and stuff like that, they just have too many strengths where it's like, okay, well, what's her weakness? And they're like, I don't know, something, and now this starts to get a little bit like, okay, well, her anti-airs aren't that good, and maybe her strength, her very defined strength, is just a little bit toned down from there. That's kind of what I see for the character, but I see most people, even if they're, threatening to leave Colleen and stuff like that, they're going to come right back. She's still a great character. I
think so. Yeah. So the other character that would have gotten this spot would have been Dalsum. But he's not on the list because he didn't make it into the spot, and the last character I think is more nerfed than he is. But so that's like an honorable mention I'll give right now. But with my research, with the reactions of like, and Arturo Sanchez, for instance, saying, it's not too bad, and looking at this, I figured, well, Colleen might have gotten hit just a little bit harder. But my 5th and final character is, and I think this is going to be the one that John disagrees with the most, is Balrog.
That's interesting.
What do you think about that?
Okay, so there's definitely a really good case for him in terms of some matchups where he uses V skill 2, and those were definitely a good amount of matchups. Like, it was a really smart idea to use that. He's clearly worse, and that is going to drop him down just on that alone. So I'm not in a heavy disagreement on this. He's just kind of the bane of my existence because of just how stupid he is with countering fireballs. That's really the biggest issue. If you're a fireball user, you probably hate this character for good reason.
Well, and especially before this. Now, what you're getting at is exactly what I think they went after. They nerfed his V skill 2, and then for those that don't need a quick refresher, V skill 2 powers up his rush punches and makes them +2. At least it used to. Now, he needs to be able to get this out and power it up. And Capcom made it 5 frames longer in its recovery, so you have 5 more frames to hit him out of it as he's trying to charge it up. And then it also has a bigger hurt box. So again, that sort of like neutral, the treatment that they give to normals to nerf him, they gave it to this too, where he's more vulnerable for longer.
Yeah.
And
the hurt
and so
box
that's
is
nice
larger
because
too. Yeah. So
right.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. That's what I think I wanted to say. Was the hurt box is larger?
Yeah,
and
the
I guess
hurt box
that's
is larger and 5 more frames of recovery. It's nice. You're definitely, there was a lot of situations with Balrog players where they just get it perfectly outside of the range, and you'd be a hair late and stuff, and that's not going to happen anymore. That hair late or whatever, you're going to connect on it. It's going to be much harder for him to get this out consistently in matches.
So not only is it slower and it's harder to get it out for Balrog players or get it charged up, but once he does the rush punch, he's going from was it from +2 to -2.
Yep.
So now he actually loses his turn. And why this is significant, especially to fireball throwers, is that Capcom clearly wants Balrog's anti-fireball tool to be V-Skill 1, the little turnaround where he can pass through a fireball. And fair enough. This move is meant to, buff his rush punches. But how this worked is that once he got that charged up and he had this ready to go, and if you're playing a fireball character, they're probably backing up and giving you some space. So you could probably get this charged up in between a fireball, neutral jump 1, charge it. Once you have that, now you're just looking for an opportunity to rush punch. And once you do that, you're in and you're +2.
Yeah.
It does the job that you want to do against zoners for you. And it doesn't go through fireballs, but you just, thread the needle slightly and there you go. And if you hit them, great. You just got a ton of damage and you can charge it up again and right back into that awesome situation. If not, hey, you're in and you're +2. So that was way too much for Balrog, and it's doing more than just its job, which I think is more to give him more rush down and a little more damage.
Right.
And they also hit tap, which is his other way of going through fireballs. It used to have fireball recovery start, and this is at levels 1 and 2. It used to start having invincibility to fireballs at frame 3. Now it doesn't have invincibility until frame 10, which further tells me the specific reason for this change was to make it so Balrog has to hold fireballs more.
Yeah.
If you want to be able to get around them, you're going to have to get rid of V-Skill 2, sacrifice all of that, and go back to V-Skill 1. And in my experiences, I haven't run into many Balrogs using V-Skill 1 at all. And I've been using Luke, I've been using Akira before that, characters with and without fireballs. I see V-Skill 2 has become that like rinse and repeat, get it, go for it, and then rinse and repeat approach has become the way Balrog players play Balrog in no small order. And so that's why I think this is one of the biggest nerfs, is because I think it's also going to change the way you're approaching Balrog on a very widespread level. Yeah. It's not everybody's Balrog that's going to get hit by this, but it's a lot. And it's like the default way that Capcom saw. It's like, oh, this character has become too unidimensional and the approach has become too obvious. Let's shake it up.
Yeah. They finally acknowledged how stupid Balrog is. This is one of the most mash your face on the joystick characters I've ever seen. And it's what Bonchan said about how this character was designed was dead on. I wouldn't have used that word, but he is so foolishly designed in this game, and he's supposed to have, the whole thing about Balrog is he's supposed to blow you up when he gets in like that. That's 100% by what the character is. He's a boxer. He gets in on you, he should mess you up. The whole thing about it was not hard for Balrog to get in on most characters in this game and then just do crazy stuff. And it's like, why was he designed this way? Why did you do it this way? So I'm actually extremely happy about this nerf. As a Rose player, you were mentioning, you hardly ever see V-Skill 1. I only see V-Skill 1 pretty much. A handful of people did use V-Skill 2 on me and then would do the TAP stuff, the turnaround punch, to get through fireballs and things. But so I'm not personally feeling this. And again, I really hate how this character is designed in this game. But overall, I do agree with you. I would have Dhalsim in there, but Balrog is also a really good choice. And just kind of organically nerfing some of Balrog's, matchups by reducing V-Skill 2 is such a blessing for everyone in the game. Low execution characters that don't require much thought, like this guy, they should not be this strong. He's still too strong, if you ask me. We'll see where he ends up at. I don't think this is going to hurt him all that much. He's just too darn good for how basic he is to play. Seriously, one of the easiest characters in the entire game to play, which is, don't make those characters super strong, Capcom, please, especially not in a game like this.
Oh, and speaking of basic, one of the other nerfs they did to this was dash straight now requires that you have charge from neutral, even when you have V-Skill 2 going on. So he used to be able to just kind of do an extra rush punch without having to charge it up. But no more. So that's my top 5. Now, there is one character that I want to just briefly touch on that's not Dhalsim, Luke. Luke was probably the character that people wanted the most nerfs for. He's new. He's they want him to be good. They want people to play him, and they want him to kind of carry momentum between Street Fighter 5 and 6, as far as I can tell. It's like the protagonist for Street Fighter 6 and the kind of the main character. So they want people playing him. Luke probably got the most nerfs in terms of quantity, or at least to rank in the top 5. But when you look at those nerfs and what they've actually done, it's like Fireball does a little less damage, has a little less pushback. Like, that's something. But man, the usability of those Fireballs and what they did for him, how quick they came out, was really the problem there, and that wasn't touched at all. Crouching medium kick is more whiff punishable and has the bigger hurt box, but and that's a big deal. That's a really good one, and his reduction in vitals is a big one. Like, Luke got hit decently hard, but he didn't really get hit in the places that he needed it the most, I think, or people wanted to see it the most. And then Capcom gave him a slew of buffs to encourage V skill and V trigger too. And what I think is going to happen is, like, it's just going to change. Some of the stuff that was really broken with V trigger 1 and such is going to be a little less broken, but they made the it's just the season of V trigger 2 for Luke, and he might even be worse than he was before in a slightly different way, depending on how things play out. So yes, he got hit with a handful of nerfs. Yes, you could argue he was in the top 5 for being the most nerfed, but because of a lot of the things that he also gained, I can't put him as a big loser in this patch. In fact, you could argue that he's a big winner because he avoided the bat so well, so gracefully. So we'll see here. Oh, and they also buffed like his EX Impaler, which is the run that can go into a multiple. Like that felt like it had almost no uses, but now you can spend an extra meter to get extra Oki at the end of combos with it, because Luke needed more Oki. So I just wanted to say that quickly about Luke, but I'd also like to hear what you guys think of this list, who you think would be on your top 5 if it's not these 5 characters, what you think of Luke, all of that stuff. Hit us up after you subscribe, and thanks a lot.